I'm here to talk to you about, I was just going to give you a little bit more, show you in a little more detail what's inside the pages of the monograph. And if you saw on the table, there was a sample monograph for the herb valerian. And I think there's still a few out there. You know, it's a freebie. It's a great herb if you don't know valerian. It's a very powerful muscle relaxant and sedative herb, although some people can have a very paradoxical reaction to valerian. It's kind of rare. But you'll see the basic structure of the monograph if you look at that. So this is the cover for the first part, which is the standards of identity, quality control. And I don't even think you can see any of this stuff, but part of the history of how this came about was a former midwife and herbalist named Aviva Ram, who subsequently went to medical school to become an OB-GYN. And she and Roy were acquainted as herbalists. And Aviva, when she was going through her residency, started seeing people come into clinic that were using cannabis. And she said, Roy, what about cannabis? I mean, should we do a monograph on this? And Roy was like, no, you know, we don't want to go there. We don't want to affiliate with that. And, you know, Aviva keeps going through her training, and she comes back to Roy and says, Roy, you know, I'm seeing these people, and it really helps them. And, you know, their pain's going away and their spasticity. So anyway, eventually Aviva convinces Roy to do the monograph. And so we've got Ethan Russo, myself, and also Jehan Marcoux, who are here at this meeting. You know, if you have any further questions or want to talk about the monograph, talk to any of us. As you can see, there's tons of authors for each section. These are all leaders in their own fields. This is the table of contents for this document. So, you know, it just starts out with the nomenclature, the scientific data, names that have been used for a plant, and then it goes into the botanical identification of the plant. This is accompanied by photographs, closer up photographs, so you can see really, you know, and this is a lot. There's plants out, you know, in the botanical world that look a lot like each other, but they're really not each other. And, you know, we don't really have that problem with cannabis so much, but, you know, this is just a standard format of the monograph so that you can positively identify this plant. So, and within this context, it's providing key information on the cultivation, the harvest, the drying, the storage, and the processing of the plant. And so then we've got, you know, up-close flower, pictures of the flower. Within the document, Roy will be clarifying some of the misconceptions and myths about different species. And then again, we got the beautiful photographs. And then we've got the microscopic. And, you know, this again is really important when you're trying to, because there's plants out there that can look like each other, and that even within the industry, they'll try to substitute for another plant because it's cheaper. So this is just the first level of, or the second level of identification, that you can go to the microscopic level. And it's just cool to look at trichomes, and you can see that there's different types of trichomes on the plant. And then we go to the constituents section, and so there's a very thorough section on all of the cannabinoids and then also the terpenoids. We don't leave out any of the constituents. It goes through the flavonoids and steroids, just every classification. So the cannabinoids aren't, you know, with any plant, it's a complex mixture, and there's a lot of different classifications of compounds. In the analytical section, it's going to establish criteria for foreign matter, moisture content, microbiological burden, pesticide residues, residual solvents. And I think I said yesterday that, you know, the residual solvent, the pesticide stuff, we're still working on that, so it's not here yet. And so here's an example of what the analytical section looks like. So we're going to have several different methods. So this is a thin layer chromatograph method. So you can see that it goes through all the details of exactly how to do this method and how to do the detection. But not only that, it shows you pictures of the chromatogram, and this is what your results should look like. So it's something that labs can use to say, here's how I can do it, and did I do it right, and does my outcome look the way it should look? And then we've got the same thing. Here's a GC, or grass chromatography with flame ionization detection method. And, you know, again, you've got the spectra of all of them. You've got the individual spectra for each compound. So this is getting down to the nitty-gritty of how do you verify that results are accurate. And these are the things that people doing laboratory analysis, they need to fully understand the complexity of all of this. So this is what's still under development, the terpene methodology, the HPLC methodology, pesticides, microbiology, and residual solvents. So on to the second part, which is the therapeutic compendium. And again, this is usually all one document, but it's going to be divided into two. So again, Ethan and I worked on this, and Jahan. We've got now, a whole different list of authors from all around the world that are outstanding in their own field. Donald Abrams is on there. I just wanted to bring him up because he was here with us this weekend. And also Philippe Lucas and Amanda Ryman. So thank you all for your contributions. So here's what the therapeutic compendium is intended to do. A detailed review of the authoritative historical literature on the medicinal uses of the plant. And this will also include what we know from Ayurvedic medicine and Chinese medicine, as well as Western herbal traditions. A complete review of safety, including adverse effects, contraindications, carcinogenicity, interactions with conventional medications, use in pregnancy and lactation, influence on driving and toxicology. It's intended to separate the wheat from the chaff as to what is known about the appropriate and safe use of cannabis medicinally versus misperceptions of what many people believe. And it's a comprehensive review of the modern clinical trials that are out there and an overview of the basic pharmacology. So here are the sections that I think we have mostly near completion. And then again, here are some of the other sections that we're still working on. So that's sort of the status of where we are with it. And then, once we have all these done, all of these go out to reviewers for final review before they're accepted for publication in the document. So just to talk a bit about the clinical evidence that we present, I don't know how many of you are familiar with, this is an evidence pyramid. So down at the bottom is test tube results or in vitro data, and I know there's a lot of popular comments on THC curing cancer because it'll kill cancer cells in a dish, growing in an incubator. But from the context of being a clinician, that isn't always translatable to a human, so it's considered very low level of evidence. From there, we go to animal research. So now we've taken it from a cell culture to a complex model in an animal to see, it worked in cells, is it going to work in a being? And then we talk about this, we editorialize, we give opinions on, do we think this should be translated to humans? Is it safe? And so, we might have a doctor here or there who tries it, and they write up a case, and they say, oh, I had this Tourette's patient, and he was on 6 medications, and nothing helped for him, and then he tried smoking some cannabis, and a bunch of his symptoms of Tourette's went away. And so it'll be written up as a case report, and that's still considered pretty low-level evidence. But then if you write up a report and you say, oh, I had 10 patients, and they all reported the same effect, then that's stronger evidence. And so then you might say, oh, I'm gonna take this to a prospective trial, and I'm gonna take a group of people and give them THC, administer cannabis or THC. And I'm going to take this group over here, and they're going to get placebo, and then I might cross them over, and one group gets the placebo, and then the other one gets the active version. And these are how we arrive at these clinical results. And so these are the sort of studies we've reviewed. And as you can imagine, there's not really a lot of studies for most disease entities, especially with the whole plant cannabis. We opted to not include in our data any clinical trials using synthetics. So you will see trials in here using just THC or Marinol. You might see some with Nabilone. And at any time, if there was a whole plant mixture used, and there's several companies, we've defined what those are, and we'll state up front. So that's the evidence hierarchy. There's a lot of question about whether this model really fits complementary and alternative medicine, but that's an aside, but it's just something to throw out there, that there's a lot of questioning about this whole evidence hierarchy, but especially as it applies to complementary and alternative medicine. So I'm just going to give you a sample of like what one of these therapeutic sections looks like. So this is the Parkinson's section. So what we opted to do in the end was there was a really nice review on the endocannabinoid system by Pal Patcher that was out in 2006. So we decided instead of having individual authors write all these sections, we would just start with what Dr. Patcher had written. And so then we're going through and critically reviewing it, and of course we have to rewrite it basically because of copyright infringements. And then we're updating it because this came out in 2006. So then we're going into the literature, and so what we come out with should be really up to date up into, you know, whatever our press date is or whatever date we finish the section. So we usually start out with a short, you know, just sort of introduction maybe to the disease entity itself or any historical uses that might have been in the literature that could be applied to Parkinson's disease. And what happens next is we start with the human. Instead of starting at the bottom of the pyramid, we're not giving you cell culture or animal data first. We're giving you, often there are surveys that are out there, so that's qualitative research where people have been asked, like a group of patients with MS, have you tried cannabis and what did you see and how were you using it? And we're also incorporating that kind of qualitative data into the monograph. So then, you know, we'll go sort of up the pyramid, randomized controlled trials, and then we go to the preclinical and animal data. So preclinical data might be something like MRIs of looking at CB1 receptor density in Parkinson postmortem brains or something like that. So it's, you know, looking, often it's ex vivo tissue or something like that, or just a measurement of something of the endocannabinoid system that might be giving us more information about why cannabis could be useful in this disease entity. And then we summarize, we write a conclusion based on everything that we've presented. So here's the conclusion for Parkinson's disease, predominantly for symptomatic control of tremor, improvement in bradykinesia, some benefit for muscle rigidity, psychosis, and levodopa-induced, what is it? Dystonia? Dyskinesia, sorry. We have some evidence from case reports and a survey saying there's benefit from smoked and internal oral consumption of crude cannabis leaves. There's general paucity of formal human trial data. There's a single trial saying, you know, negative results. 3 reports of CBDs at doses higher than generally achievable with typical smoking patterns, decreases in dystonia. So, you know, we really give it a good summary. So if you want to just go in and read the summary, and you know, if you wanted to know, can cannabis be good for Parkinson, you can read the summary. And then what we're also including is every clinical trial is also in a table. So if you wanted to just go to the table and say, what kind of a study was it? What was the intervention? Here's CBD, smoked cannabis, nabilone, Canador, et cetera. Who did it? What were they looking at? What was the outcome measure? What were they measuring? Was it sleep quality? Was it tremor? What was it? And then what did they find out? Was it helpful or not? And what sort of adverse effects did they see? So sort of another summation, but in a table form. And then we also decided with the qualitative data, because, you know, Roy really liked the real world application of like the questionnaire of people that are actually smoking cannabis who have Parkinson, but it's not like a formal trial. So whenever possible, if we have that data, we made a table so that you could actually look at this data as well. And I just wanted to say there's just one sort of caveat for the whole monograph, which has to do with the medicine that's being dispensed today. And if you look at any data, this is 1993, this is 2008. This is a trend in increasing THC levels over time. This is data from the Netherlands, and I'm sorry that I don't have the reference for that. I think it was Arno that published that. Here's some that was pretty recent from California, and they actually looked at both THC, you can see trending upward, and then CBD, you see this downward trend. And then here's the ratio of THC to CBD, and you can see how the ratio is going up. And so Ethan and I have talked at length about if we go and look at all this historical data from Egypt and China, I mean, what was the plant they were using? Does it have any significance? What we're publishing here, does it have any relationship to this historical data? And the answer to that question is we have no idea. there's hints here and there that certain plants from certain countries might have been really CBD rich because of what they said it was good for, like inflammation. Whereas, others, it's clear that there was psychoactivity going on. So it's just sort of a caveat, something to think about, and that there's biphasic effects depending on dose. So whereas you might have an anxiolytic effect at a low dose with CBD or a high dose of THC, it can be totally opposite if you have a high dose or a low dose. And this is a common pharmacological phenomenon. So it's just something to think about, because as we're moving forward, we're saying, how do we help guide doctors in guiding patients about what sort of dose do they need? And, it's a huge question, except that we do know that at some point, you can be having beneficial effects up into a certain dose, and then all of a sudden, the side effects of anxiety or feeling uncomfortable will outweigh the benefit that the patient may get. And that's the sort of data from pharmacology that you could look at. Anyway, I kind of already acknowledged everybody in the beginning, but there's all the names again, and we've had a great time doing this, and again, it's just been an honor to work with all of these people and for everybody's support, and I hope that you'll take advantage of getting your hands on this document and helping distribute it once that it comes out so that it can continue to help guide our industry moving forward.
It is truly a pleasure to be working for ASA. This project is amazing. I love talking about it, so please come find me because I can't go through all of it in this short time. ASA has been fighting for safe access for over a decade, and now that we've seen 18 states district come online, we are turning our attention to not only safe access, but safe medicine and safe distribution systems. And so working with APA, and you'll hear from APA in a little bit, we are working on industry standards. And these are recommendations to regulators for rules. And this is not necessarily best practice, but that will continue to evolve. And so what my experience, I come from Colorado, is what we've seen in Colorado is what I call law enforcement heavy, health and safety light. And so we want to have the conversation with regulators that this is not just a Schedule I substance that can be diverted. It is a product that is going to patients and in some states just consumers. And so we have a 3-part program that we're working on. ASA was awarded a certificate by the District of Columbia to do training, so we are thrilled about that. Yay, ASA. And what I love about that is ASA's been training dispensary operators, again, for over a decade on how to treat patients. And District of Columbia is one of the first municipalities we've seen actually adopt this as a mandatory training for its operators. And so we would like to offer this voluntarily across the country and hopefully get this to be mandated nationally. People who are dispensing medicine should be well educated. The second part of this is the Patients First certification, which will be a certification that ASA gives to industry, cultivators, manufacturers, distributors, and labs, saying that they are compliant with these standards. Again, we are just starting this, but this will allow patients, medical care providers, and others to know that this operation is compliant with standards, and we need this in the industry. We need it to grow. Our industry is in its infancy, and we can learn a lot from our friends in the Netherlands and Canada who have been working on these programs for years. And as APA continues their work, the American Herbal Products Association, these standards will only get better with your input as well. And so that is a really short summary of the program, and I encourage you to come talk to me about it because it is a great program. It's something we hope to roll out nationally on a voluntary basis, and then to continue to work on the political front to have these mandated as standards. This is a product that we are putting in the public, and it needs to be a safe product. So in addition to encouraging safe access in other states, the next step is safe products. Thank you.
I want to start with the American Herbal Products Association is not the American Herbal Pharmacopoeia. I really appreciate all of the acknowledgement that you've all given me. I mean, I think 15 of you have said, oh yeah, the monograph is wonderful, and I appreciate that. But that's not APA, that's AHP. Now, just to make it clear, I'm on the board of AHP. I'm the longest serving board member of AHP.
So thank you.
Yeah, Roy Upton, and I was a big advocate for creating this cannabis monograph. In fact, I'm going to expand on Michelle's story in a minute. But Roy Upton of AHP is an active member of APA. He serves on numerous committees. He's on our Government Relations Committee, on our Chinese Herbal Products Committee, on our Standards Committee. He's exactly the kind of member that those of you who joined APA we want to see as members. Very active, very involved, pushing us to do the work that you, the members, need us to do. But it's interesting hearing Michelle tell that story about Aviva needing to convince Roy. When we formed the Cannabis Committee at APA, Roy came to me and he said, I think that's a terrible idea. That's not our community. That's a different community. And, you know, I had to kind of stand back to that and say, I think you're wrong. It's a community that we've forgotten, but it's within our tent. We can expand our tent and so I was really surprised. I think it was 5 weeks later where he called me and said, I'm going to do a cannabis monograph. And I said, what? But I'm really thrilled that he is. He and I have talked about this at length. I spoke with him about sharing some references that he needed just last week. We were trying to find a historical description or definition of hashish. We need to understand what that was historically, especially with regard to what it means today. And that actually, in a sense, came up in our committee meeting today. I know I'm really thrilled to be active in this cannabis committee. It is, we're in a little bit over our heads. We've got too much to do. I've told Steph any number of times, I have 14 committees. And so, you know, we've got just a lot to do. But this work is very, it's exciting and it seems so timely. I think it was Karen was talking to me earlier. She talked to me yesterday, hey, can you give me all those other three like really soon? And then this morning she repeated that, and I understand there's a really sense of timeliness that we've got one of the documents that we've been working on done, and we're working on the others. Now, I'm not sure at this point, do you want me to report on our industry meeting, or is that a little later?
No, that's smart. So I think people just want to know more about your organization and about the Cannabis Committee.
Okay. Let me just, the short version is APA was founded in 1982. There was already a national trade association in the natural products industry, and there were a lot of herbal companies that had no complaints about it. It's the National Nutritional Foods Association, now called the Natural Products Association. We didn't think they were doing anything wrong. We just felt that we really needed to bring the herbal voice into some kind of community where that knowledge, that specific interest. We were a different group than the people that were selling, organic foods or vitamin products, and we had a kind of a sense of a much longer history, a very cultural history that goes back, centuries. It goes back as long as we've been in community as a species. And so that just came up, and it was a very small organization for years, but we continued to just attract more and more companies. It started with some of the Utah companies and a bunch of the West Coast companies. I've often said you need to picture the room of the founders was a bunch of hippies and a bunch of Mormons. But what they had in common was herbs and a commitment to quality in herbs. We knew we weren't in this for the short term. We knew that if we were going to bring this emerging marketplace into essentially a continuity of the herbal traditions that have been in our lives and cultures forever, that we needed to be responsible with regard to the needs of the consumer, not just our business needs, but address the consumer's needs. So, you know, this all sounds familiar in this room, doesn't it? Safe access, that's what it's about. And when we started our cannabis committee actually before I had met Steph or Asa or most of you, when existing members, we have about 20 analytical labs in our membership, and a couple of them came to us and just expressed frustration over the zaniness of the fact that they're not allowed to receive samples for testing. And they were talking about even with hemp, where the hemp foods company want to assure that there's less than 0.3 parts per million or percent THC, and what they said is, and if there's more than that, I'm in possession of a controlled substance. And so they were very frustrated with that. They were the ones that pushed for the formation of the committee. And then when we started communicating into this broader community that already existed, when I met Steph, we started talking about, well, isn't this the home to bring the industry side of the medical cannabis group, but we also had found that there was a lot of interest in hemp. Bronner's has been an APA member for some years, and any of you know David Bronner, he's been a real mover and a shaker on that ingredient, that article. He's a hero to me, he really is. I've told him a number of times his grandfather would be proud of him. He just keeps doing the right thing over and over. So we've had this cannabis committee together for about 2.5 years, and depending on your view, we've either gotten 2 or 3 months worth done in the last 2.5 years, or we've gotten 15 years worth done. What we know is there's a lot more work to do. I can tell you the meeting today was very energizing. There were about 40 or 50 people in there, lots of opinions, but at the same time, all of the opinions, no one in there said we need to figure out a way to cheapen the product, we need to figure out a way to get away with things. I mean, this community is clearly aligned in the sense of, you know, this is my new to the community perception. There is an incredible commitment to integrity of the business model and the product, and just an incredible understanding of that your products are in direct relationship with your customer, the patient, and that to me is just remarkable. It's a pleasure to be part of, be in the room.
This is actually the second time I've been here in this hotel with my sister and with our family. And that's what we've become. We've become family. Most of everybody in this room, I've gotten to know. I know by a first name basis. I've gotten to know your credit card, your telephone numbers. I've gotten to know where you come from and who you are. And like Steph says, the most important thing that we can do in pushing a political agenda, and especially one that's right, is unify. And this is the National ASA, UFCW, APA Unity Conference. And this is how we're going to get to where we're going. When we walk into the Capitol, like we've done in so many other capitals, people will listen to us and they'll take us seriously. One of the greatest things that we've done is we've stopped going into the Capitol with separate voices, because a million voices saying different things can never be heard. As a matter of fact, they drown each other out. But when you take that million voices and you all say the same thing, they can't help but hear us. And I'll tell you one thing, they will hear us. Because we will walk in these capitals, we will go in these doors, and we will talk to these legislators, and we will tell them the truth. And we won't listen to their fear, and we won't listen to the divisiveness, and we won't let our voices be drowned out by other mainstream partners. And I'm not going to knock anybody. I'm just going to say I'm not going to knock anybody. When I see Dr. McGuffin, when I see Dr. Sexton, when I see Joe Elford, when I see Joe Lamoureux, and the sisters and brothers here that I don't know yet, that I'm going to get to know, because I have to know you, and you have to know me, and we have to know each other, because we're family, and we're going to get there together. I know one thing. I know that we are going to get there together. Mainstream coalitions is the key to politics. We can get all the money in the world, and we can carry it in, and we can throw it at legislators, and you know what they'll do? They'll use us, they'll break us off, they'll lie to us, they'll trick us, they'll demean us, and they'll sell us out to anybody that they think is going to be more popular than being with us. We are a tough issue. Any issue that's right in this country, politically, is tough. And when you go in and tell the truth, they're not ready for that. They're ready to hear baloney, lies, spins, anything that they have to hear and anything they have to say to keep us all at odds. Because it's when they create the law that the industry comes together. And when the industry comes together, then we become an unstoppable force. We're creating jobs, we're creating revenues, we're creating safe communities, we're taking away drugs, we're taking away gangs, we're taking away criminals. And we're replacing it with sincerity and dignity, and yes, collective bargaining. Collective bargaining. Collective bargaining is your friend. The union is your friend. And we're going to return everybody's credit cards. Thank you, Lanny. When you see the union, don't be afraid. When you see the union, don't think that it's going to be an enemy or a problem or divisive or anxious. See the union and know that we've done this before. UFCW is the retail, agriculture, food processing, pharmacies, healthcare, and yes, with Hemp Textiles Industries Union, we've been doing this for a long time. Meat cutters, a long time ago, meat plants, used to make entire cities sick because they were cutting the meat the wrong way, building the plants in the wrong places. They weren't disposing of the waste in proper ways. And cities and communities had people that were getting sick and dying because the meat was being done wrong. And so the city would show up at the edge of town at the meat plant, and they'd say, we're going to burn you down. We're going to run you out of here, with the same fear and the same anxiety that we face today. So we had to come in and we had to figure out what was going on, submit a plan, take it to the legislature, and get things like the FDA created, which maybe not be our friend. We can all go to McDonald's and have a burger. So we have to become the FDA of the industry and create those agencies and create those laws and regulations. Together we can do it. We've got our folks here from Colorado. We've got our folks here from New England. We've got our folks here from the East Coast, from the West Coast. UFCW is the industry union. You are our industry, you are our members, and you are our sisters and brothers, and we are going to fight until we get to where we're going. We're going to take it, and then we're going to do what we need to do with it, which is create and maintain safe access for patients and create and maintain safe communities. Thank you very much for letting me serve you in our industry, and we're grateful. Thank you.
So something I mentioned yesterday, that one of the best compliments I've gotten about this weekend is that someone said to me, you know what, Steph, I finally get you after 10 years. What you're trying to do with medical cannabis is that you're representing the 80%. And I'm not sure if it was a compliment, I think it was. But it really does say what the work that we're doing at ASA and what we're trying to do is create a space that those 80% of Americans who agree with us feel comfortable standing next to us and want to be associated with us. And I know that when we've talked to members, one of the #1 reasons that they're afraid to go speak out in their community isn't because of law enforcement, isn't because of losing their children necessarily. It's because they're afraid of being associated with what they perceive to be the medical cannabis movement. And I'm telling you right now, if they saw this room, they're going to be here next year, right? So ASA has actually partnered with one of our board members, is creating a campaign to help bring some of those voices and bring the image of this room to the country. And it's also a very good friend of mine, Bianca Barnhill.
Hello there, fellow brothers and sisters. I would like to applaud Asa and Steph on this room full of people and this event this weekend. Your work is changing the way people see patients and see this as a medicine, and you're just freaking awesome, and you're my soul sister, and I feel so blessed to be here with everyone in this room. And all the different faces that are here today. It's really an honor to be a part of this movement. Steph and I became friends a few years ago when we started discussing different platforms for cannabis patients to be able to come out, and something that the mainstream movement would accept. Up until this point, I don't believe that there's been a platform that has existed for all different types of people to come forward and say that they believe cannabis should be legalized, and not necessarily just that they consume it or use it as a medication. So it spawned from me being a cancer survivor. I was diagnosed with stage 2 colorectal cancer about 9 years ago, and at the time I felt as though cannabis was for the terminally ill when I heard the term medical marijuana. And after post-cancer, I was on 13 different medications, and someone thought that I was dying, and I said, no, I'm cancer-free. And they sort of gave me that, well, you need to get off whatever it is that you're on because it's killing you sort of look. And I found cannabis, and within 6 weeks I was off all 13 medications. And so it was then that I really took seriously the activism part of my role in this community, and started to reach out to some of my mainstream connections, trying to get them to come forward for the movement. And I found even as little as 3 years ago, it was a very difficult thing for people to come out and say that they consumed cannabis. So with working with Steph and being on the board of directors at ASA, I came up with a platform called I Choose Cannabis. I felt as though it was a name that sort of allowed people to come out and speak on behalf of people that they knew that were patients, or that they knew somebody that it had helped. Because at this point, our brothers, our sisters, our aunts, our uncles, so many people have had someone, if you're not a direct patient yourself, you've had someone be affected and had their life changed by cannabis. It's become a conversation that most households now in America and across the globe are having. So this platform is really exciting for us and ASA, and we will be doing interviews tomorrow and PSAs. The idea will be that we will get lots of different patients to come out and express their statement that I choose cannabis, so that we can create a platform that is more like a civil rights issue and let our voices be heard. That way we don't really feel as intimidated coming out as a consumer. I think it might be an easier lead in for a lot of people to understand, and the faces in this room represent people next door and people that other people can relate to. So I really believe it's going to be an excellent platform. I know that the mainstream media will probably grab onto this because it's something that this movement has yet to have built. So I'm really excited to be a part of it, and I applaud everyone that is here and lends their voice and their face. And when we launch this, everyone is a board member, everyone that is a member of ASA will get a little package on what it entails, and I hope everyone will reach out to their communities and spread it through social networking. And I'm really excited. I believe it's a platform that it just has never really been done before. And like this, the slogan here for this Unity Conference this weekend is bridging the gap between public and policy. We will continue to use that slogan in the I Choose Cannabis campaign because that's going to make the difference. If somebody's in Congress's daughter or son sees something through social networking and social media, I think that those are the things that can make the difference. So lending your voice and your face to the movement, I hope that you'll trust me and ASA with that, and we will make sure that you are put out in the most appropriate and protected, arena possible. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Bianca. You know what? One of the things I've also talked about a lot over the last couple of days is just that ASA, we really look to other movements for guidance and for understanding. And within the GLBT movement in this country, there was a big change that happened when the movement stopped talking about their individual rights and started talking more about a problem within society. And so a lot of the first gay rights activism was about individuals, like I'm gay, I'm proud, right? And it was very focused on the individual. And so if you weren't gay, then it didn't really feel like there was a space for you in that movement. But then the GLBT movement then created a friends and family campaign that I think we've all seen, right? Of people that said, my son is gay and this is why I'm involved. And I think that is what we're looking at the I Choose Cannabis campaign, is to create a platform. So it's not just about, I need cannabis, I'm using cannabis, but I want to choose cannabis, right? Right now, in this country, 1 out of 4 people gets cancer. Sorry, don't look around. Don't do the math. But at some point in this society, you are going to have to deal with treating cancer, right? 1 out of 4 of us. And I think that our generation, what we want to say is that when we have to deal with this in our lives or our families' lives, I do not want to have to worry about my medicine being illegal. And I think that is a message that we can bring to people that they can associate with. So I just want to thank Bianca for bringing this campaign to us.
As with all things medical marijuana, the rescheduling case has been a situation of ups and downs. On January 22nd, I get a call at 6:30 a.m. Anyone who knows me knows I'm not awake anywhere near 6:30 a.m., so I'm wondering if it was a wrong number or what was going on. For whatever reason, I checked my cell phone and I see a DC number. And that call came from the District of Columbia Circuit Court of Appeals. And they left a message that at 10 a.m. our time, 7 a.m. your time, we will be coming out with an opinion in the rescheduling case. So just after 7 o'clock a.m. my time, I open up the opinion. And I immediately look at it. I mean, with any lawyer, there's that moment of tension when you open up an opinion and you know you're about to find out big news for the first time. First thing I see is it's a 2-to-1 split. So I'm thinking, hey, that's good news. This was an up. Unfortunately, then I go a little bit further down and I see petition denied. And so, you know, your emotions can change on a dime. But before I talk about more of the ups and downs in this case, or I should say the ups and the downs in this case, under the Controlled Substances Act, you have 5 schedules of substances. And they're ranked, in theory, according to 3 criteria, but you really can distill them. And those 2 criteria are, on the one hand, whether the substance has a currently accepted medical use for treatment in the United States. On the other hand, you have what's called relative abuse potential. So at least in an ideal world, those substances that have medical use and are less harmful than other substances would be lower on the schedules, would be placed in Schedule 5, whereas those substances that are the most harmful and have no medical use would be placed in Schedule 1. Unfortunately, through various flukes, marijuana was placed in Schedule 1 and remains there today. So you just have this absurd situation where marijuana is in Schedule 1 and drugs like methamphetamine and cocaine are in Schedule 2. And this makes no sense, but you at least would think, fortunately, under the Controlled Substances Act, there's a mechanism to change this, that you can file a petition to reschedule a substance if you disagree with that scheduling determination, and we clearly disagree with that scheduling determination, and I certainly think for good reason. So in 2002, ASA, along with the CRC, Dr. Getman, and a number of other groups and individual patients filed a petition to reschedule marijuana under the Controlled Substances Act. In this over 100-page document written primarily by Dr. Getman, we challenged the DEA on both scores. One, we demonstrate over 200 studies that demonstrate or that recognize that marijuana does have medical use. On the other hand, we challenge the idea that marijuana has a greater abuse potential than these other Schedule 2, Schedule 3 substances. So the DEA played the game that it's played throughout all of these rescheduling petitions, and that's to delay, and to delay some more. Because they don't really want to give an answer to these rescheduling petitions, and quite frankly, if I were on their side, I wouldn't relish having to give an answer either. So they delayed for 9 years, and so in 2011, we filed a petition in the DC Circuit to compel agency action that's unreasonably delayed. And we gave a number of reasons why their delay was unreasonable, one of which is they had already announced publicly where they were going to come out on the issue, yet they wouldn't announce it to us, because if they announced it to us, that would give us an opportunity to go to court and challenge them. So when it became time for their opposition to that petition became due, rather than respond to the contention that they had unreasonably delayed, the DEA actually gave us a response. In other words, they mooted our lawsuit by giving us a response. They're no longer delaying and giving us a response. Now, when we got the response and I opened up that response, this time I wasn't holding my breath. I knew pretty well what the outcome would be, and it was a denial of our petition. But that opened the door for us to go to court. Under the Controlled Substances Act, you can go to the DC Circuit and challenge the administrator's action as arbitrary and capricious. And we did this. But then we hit another down. And the down was when I found out what panel of judges this case was assigned to. And it wasn't a panel I was particularly pleased with, and so actually asked that the case be reassigned. And sure enough, the case was reassigned. And there's this, what we call in the law, the myth of mechanical jurisprudence, which is the idea that judges are just like umpires and they just call balls and strikes. This is a myth. You have better panels, you have worse panels. But then sure enough, the case was reassigned, and reassigned to a better panel. So again, you go from a down to an up. So we go through the case, and one major issue in the case involves something called standing. And the last marijuana petition in court, or medical marijuana petition in court, gets rejected on the basis of standing. And I won't go into the technical details, because it's late in the day. But suffice it to say that even if marijuana were rescheduled, it doesn't necessarily mean that marijuana all of a sudden becomes legal. Substances, for instance, like cocaine are in Schedule 2, but they still have very severe penalties associated with them. So it would be a tremendous step in the right direction for marijuana to be rescheduled, but it doesn't automatically mean that it would be legalized under federal law for medical use. So we challenged the government, DEA, on those two scores. And what the court ultimately did was it did two things, if nothing more. The reason why it was a 2-to-1 split is because we won on standing. We actually won on standing for the first time in a published decision of this nature ever, which is definitely a step in the right direction. Thanks in large part to Michael Krowitz, who's at this conference today, we won on standing. The bad news is we lost on the merits. So we got the standing, but what the court did was it actually made an argument that even the government didn't make, which was an argument that to have currently accepted medical use, to have adequate and well-controlled studies, you actually have to have phase 2 or phase 3 FDA-approved research. And this wasn't even an argument that the government itself made. You can have adequate and well-controlled studies even if you don't have that sort of research. And we believe that we either have it or we certainly will have it soon, which is why we're heading in the right direction. We've got standing and we'll be able to revisit the issue. On the other hand, because of the clunkiness of the way the Controlled Substances Act is written, if something doesn't have medical use, there's the question, which of the 5 schedules do you put it in? If it has a lower abuse potential than something that's in Schedule 2, where does it go? A question that's been unresolved by the courts and a question that this court didn't even want to address, which may well form the basis for a petition for rehearing, which we'll likely be filing in the next couple weeks. So the short of it, as this conference I think has really emphasized to me, is that these lawsuits aren't just about always winning every single one. I mean, certainly it's more fun to win than to lose. But the idea is that the interplay between courts and politics is tremendous. And what this case really emphasized to me is that medical marijuana is something that has the support of 80% of the public. The question is, when are we going to get people to start talking about the issue more? Once people start talking about the issue more, that's when we're going to be successful. That's why it helps to have conferences like this with the lobbying day coming up. You have 3 branches of government. We can win this battle in any one of the 3 branches. We can win it in the courts, we can win it in Congress, and we can win it with the right president. So, especially looking around and seeing this large turnout and seeing the commitment of the folks who are here, we will win this battle, and we'll win it hopefully sooner than later. Thank you very much.
As a medical cannabis patient, my experience, I think, was a pretty rare one of how I became a patient. And my doctor brought up medical cannabis as a treatment option to me. I actually had no idea that cannabis was an anti-inflammatory. I thought that that basically the whole issue was about letting people smoke pot if they want to, if they were dying. And having a doctor who knew very little but still knew enough to say, this is an option we should try in your treatment, saved my life, and is why I'm here today and why why ACE was created. But I think that, thank you. That was a big run-on sentence, sorry. But something that I know, and I think that we've all talked about in our various stakeholder groups, is that is a rare experience. And that there are millions of people in this country that are needlessly suffering because they don't know about cannabis or their doctors don't know or won't know about medical cannabis. And I think often patients get frustrated that doctors are the gateway, really, for us to be able to get legal protections, but that our doctors have never learned about the endocannabinoid system. And so almost every meeting I've been in since the founding of ASA, doctor education has been something that the patients need. And I am really excited about this new program and a partnership that we have with CCIC that actually are some of the most amazing doctors and researchers in Canada and in the US that have created a new doctor education program. They were here as a part of the conference, giving continuing medical education credits to doctors that will learn about the endocannabinoid system and how it can help patients. So I'd love to introduce you to Tanya, who's our partner here in the US, to tell you a little bit more about this program.
Everyone. So as Steph mentioned, I'm here to talk about the problem of medical education for healthcare practitioners and to discuss a solution. I'm here on behalf of the Canadian Consortium for the Investigation of Cannabinoids. It's hard, so I'm just going to call it CCIC, and I suggest you do as well. After being here for the last couple of days, this is a slide that you're probably familiar with. There is a great need for cannabinoid education. So you see here, cannabinoid science is lagging behind other medical sciences. There are a number of reasons for that, some good reasons, some bad reasons. But the point is that our understanding of the endocannabinoid system in cannabis has been growing exponentially. And in any situation, this is a lot for healthcare practitioners to keep up with. But exacerbating this problem is that the basic education is not provided in medical schools or through the usual routes of continuing medical education. And I was looking for a way to express this lack, and what I turned to was practice exams for the USMLE. So that's the qualifying exam that medical students have to take to become doctors. And you can see here the types of information that students need to know about cannabis and the endocannabinoid system to become a physician. And this is really basic information that most of you probably knew before you walked in the door. It's probably some of the first things you ever learned about the endocannabinoid system, and it's very far removed from therapy. It's very much focused on the simple rudimentary aspects of the endocannabinoid system, as well as just adverse effects, how marijuana can harm you, and use of Marinol clinically. So we've come to a point where 1/3 of our healthcare practitioners live in states that have medical marijuana laws, and yet they're limited to some of the most basic information available to them through medical education. So in looking at how to deal with this problem, I thought I'd do a very, very brief summary of how HCPs keep up with science in the medical world. So I'm going to start with the perfect world, and this is certainly, these are certainly three key areas of education. One is self-study, highly motivated healthcare practitioners going out and learning what they feel they need to learn, turning to the medical journals, turning to their peers, reaching out to academia, academia providing the conferences and the education that they need. And also I really want to point out the role of patients and the ability of patients when they find out about new things in the medical world, and when they take their understanding about cannabis and bring that to their physician and have an open dialogue and kind of motivate them to search further. This is the way we would like to think that all of our HCPs get their information. And I think this is certainly true of probably all of the HCPs that you see at the conference this weekend. And it's a very admirable model. But for better or for worse, this is the real world. The majority of medical education is sponsored by pharmaceutical companies. There are pros to that and there are cons to that. It's simply a reality. And I've listed out here a number of different tactics that are used in this environment. And I was able to do this because I know it very well. I come from working in pharma. So I'll just go ahead and verbalize what some of you might be thinking and just say, in my work outside of medical education about cannabis, I help pharmaceutical companies communicate information and data to healthcare practitioners. I'm actually very proud of the work that I do with pharma. What I bring to this movement is that knowledge and that expertise. I understand the language, the look and the feel of mainstream medical education that has the kind of big budget behind it. And I think that's really important because healthcare practitioners have limited bandwidth. I mean, you go to your doctor's office, they have very little time. They don't always have the time to research what they want to be researching on their own. And so it's important to understand who else is communicating to them, how they're doing it, and to question, how can we do the same thing and get the same kind of attention that the guys with the big bucks get. So, and I want to make a caveat that I'm the only member of the CCIC that has that unique relationship with pharma. So what are the current resources that HCPs have to learn about cannabis and the endocannabinoid system? So listed here is the Canadian Consortium, who I'm here representing. Patients Out of Time, who if you don't know them already, I highly recommend you get to know them fast. They have a CME program every 2 years that was my introduction to the movement. It's how I met the CCIC. And it's a great opportunity for not only healthcare practitioners, but patients, folks from the dispensary world. I mean, the whole world kind of comes together through Patients Out of Time, through their provision of really high quality CME education. There's also the International Cannabinoid Research Society, which is more of a preclinical world, the search for discovery regarding the endocannabinoid system. CCIC also has partnerships with them. They had a clinical aspect. And also the IACM, the International Association for Cannabinoid Medicines. Our executive director also sits on their board. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the CCIC. Our mission is to bring credibility to cannabinoid medicine. We're a nonprofit organization formed in 2000 as an interdisciplinary research consortium. We have over 200 members. They're primarily clinicians and scientists. And although the organization is registered in Canada, our reach is global, as is our membership. Our official mission statement is to promote evidence-based education concerning the endocannabinoid system and therapeutic applications of cannabinoid agents to clinical audiences. So in doing that, we've conducted over 50 live CME programs. I'm going to discuss exactly what CME is in a few moments. That includes dinner meetings, workshops, clinical symposia in Canada, Europe, and the United States. All of these are targeted to healthcare practitioners. We've reached nearly 2,000 healthcare practitioners to date, and our feedback has been overwhelmingly positive on every single evaluation. Thank you. Across the board, on a scale of 1 through 5, it's almost all 5s, sometimes a 4. I don't think I've ever seen a 3. So what's great about our programming and what attracted me to the CCIC is that they're using a format that healthcare practitioners are familiar with, creating a space for open dialogue that they're comfortable with. It's something that they do in their regular lives, learning about any other topic in medicine. It's just that the topic in this case happens to be cannabis. So this is the program that we delivered yesterday. It was a great success. This was the first program where we got the Department of Health on board. So the Washington, D.C. DOH came. They were able to explain their guidelines in person and answer questions from DC physicians about how to implement and how to use cannabis in patients within the regulatory guidelines. We had over 50 attendees, and of those 50, 36 of them were cannabis-naive physicians. And our program is co-sponsored by the University of California, San Francisco in collaboration with the Society for Cannabis Clinicians, and is funded by ASA, for which we are extraordinarily grateful. So I want to talk a little bit about the value of CME. CME stands for Continuing Medical Education. The main definition of CME is that it's accredited. So the University of California, San Francisco reviewed our application. They have guaranteed that we have no conflicts of interest, that we're coming from a purely academic perspective, and that our product is of high value to practicing clinicians. An important part of this accreditation is that it provides motivation for healthcare practitioners. HCPs need to fulfill a certain number of CME credits every year. So by providing those credits, we create an opportunity for them to not only learn about something that's incredibly important for them to learn about, but to also fulfill that requirement. There's a funding firewall, so whoever provides the funding for the CME has absolutely no impact on the content, which helps guarantee that the content is unbiased. It is strictly the perspective of the faculty members. It is evidence-driven, and is clinically relevant to HCPs.